Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, we're going to cover inheritance in C++, and we're going to go over the protected access modifier. So inheritance is one of the four pillars of object-oriented programming, and it revolves around class hierarchy. Specifically, inheritance allows us to create child classes that are built upon existing parent classes. And just like with many words in programming, we have a lot of synonyms. So a parent class is also referred to as a base class or a superclass. And a child class is referred to as a derived class or a sub or superclass. And why do we use inheritance in object-oriented programming? Well, inheritance promotes code reusability since the child classes inherit all attributes and methods from the parent class. And the parent class is usually used as an interface for various child classes. So let's go over an example. Let's say I want to design a video game, and in my video game I have characters. So let's create a warrior game character. And what attributes can we give to a warrior? We can give the warrior a health. We can also give the warrior a weapon. So I'm going to represent the weapon as a string, and with the weapon, a warrior can attack. So here I'm going to define a method, void attack. And here I'm just going to add a print statement. So attack. Now, of course, in my game, I want to design other characters. So let's say I want to add a mage. So I'm going to copy and paste this and change this to a mage. Now let's say while I'm designing the game, I want to add more features. For example, I want the game characters to have levels. In this case, I'm going to add an integer level, set it to 1, and now I will need to do the same for the mage. So here you can see we have a problem. Every time I need to make a code change for warrior, I have to do a similar code change for the mage. If I want to add another method for warrior, such as recover or defend, I would have to do the same for the mage. And that's where inheritance comes in. So I'm going to remove this. And here I'm going to create one base class. And we'll call it game character. And in this base class, I can define all the attributes the game characters will have. So let's say we have a health, we have a weapon, and we have a level. And in this base class, we also have a method for attacking. And here I'm just going to have the game character attack with a punch. So we've created our base class, and now we can create classes that will inherit from this base class. So now let's create our warrior. And to inherit from a class, you would put colon and the name of the class that you want to inherit from. So I'm going to do public game character, and I can add a mage. And let's add one more, archer. And let's not forget the semicolon. Alright, so now we have one base class, and from that base class, we've created 3 new classes. So we have warrior, mage, and archer. And now in our main function, let's create some instances of these classes. So over here, I'm going to create a warrior, a mage, and an archer. And because each of these classes inherit from game character, we can access the methods. So we can do warrior.attack, mage.attack, and archer.attack. All right, now let's save and run the program. And you can see for all 3 classes, each class attacks with a punch. So all we had to do was write one method, and that method can now be used by warrior, mage, and archer. Now in this game that we've created, we have a data member called weapon. And because each game character can have a weapon, we don't necessarily need to attack with a punch. Instead, a warrior should use a sword, a mage should use a spell. So what I can do is I can assign each character a weapon, and they can attack with that weapon. So since weapon is private, what I can do is add a getter and setter. And I just simply need to add it in the game character class since it is the base class. And the setter and getter will be inherited by warrior, mage, and archer. So here I'm going to create a method, set weapon. And the weapon is represented as a string. So I'm going to pass in a string by reference. And since this parameter name is the same as the attribute name, I'm going to use this weapon to refer to the attribute and assign it the parameter weapon. Let's also create a getter. So here we're going to return a string get weapon. And since this method is not going to modify any of the data members, we can mark this as const. So here we're just going to return weapon. Now let's scroll all the way down, and over here, before we attack, we're going to assign the warrior a weapon. So warrior.setWeapon sword, and we're going to print out the weapon. So cout warrior.getWeapon, and I'm going to copy and paste this for the mage, change this to mage, and the mage will use a staff. So let's change this to mage, and let's do the same for archer. So archer is going to use a bow, and let's change this to archer. All right, now let's save and run the program. And here you can see we assigned the warrior a sword, the mage a staff, and the archer a bow. All right, so now each of the classes has a weapon, and so we should make it so that the classes attack with the weapon instead of attacking with a punch. So derived classes will inherit methods of a base class, but they can override the methods that they inherit. So in this example, we can have each class override the attack method. So over here, we're going to redefine attack. And for the warrior, we're just going to cout slashed with a sword. And let's copy and paste this. The magician is going to use a fire spell. And let's paste for archer. And the archer is going to fire an arrow. So now for our three classes, we've overridden the attack method. So if I save and run a program, you can see the warrior slashed with a sword, the mage used a fire spell, and the archer shot an arrow. So when we call the attack methods of these three classes, they're not going to use the attack method of the base class. Instead, they're going to use the attack method that was redefined or overridden. Alright, so that's how we can use inheritance to reuse code. And now one more thing I want to go over is the idea of protected access specifier. So by default, classes are private. So private data members are only accessible within the class that created them, whereas protected data members can be inherited and accessed by derived classes. So actually, this should be protected, okay? Now, for our class, warrior, when we attack with a sword, we should design it so that we only slash with a sword if the warrior has a sword. So here I'm going to do if weapon is not equal to sword, and here you can see if I hover over this, it says member game character weapon is inaccessible. So why is that? Well, private data members are inherited, but they cannot be accessed outside of the class that created them. So while this warrior inherits weapon, it is not able to access the data member since it is private. And so what we must do is over here, we should declare these data members as protected. So private data members are private to the class that created them, and protected data members are private within the class hierarchy. So they are still private, except they can be accessed by all classes that inherit them. So if I scroll back down, you can see the error goes away. And here I can do, if weapon is not equal to sword, I'm going to attack with a punch. But instead of copying and pasting the attack with a punch, what I can do is call the attack method from the base class. That way we don't have to copy and paste code. So over here, to access that method, we just need to do game character, : attack. And here I'm going to add else. And let's do the same for the mage and archer. So over here, we're going to make a check. If weapon is not equal to staff, game character, attack. And let's do the same for the archer. If weapon is not equal to bow, game character dot attack, else the archer will fire an arrow. So now each character has a weapon, and I'm going to save and run the program. And you can see the warrior has a sword, and therefore will slash with a sword. The mage has a staff, and therefore will use a fire spell. And the archer has a bow, and therefore will shoot an arrow. Okay? Now let's take away the sword from the warrior, and let's also take away the bow from the archer. Now only the mage has a weapon. Now let's save and run the program. And you can see the warrior does not have a weapon and therefore attacked with a punch. The mage has a staff, and so the mage used the fire spell, and the archer does not have a bow and therefore attacked with a punch. Alright, so that's it for inheritance. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you did, make sure you give this video a like. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. And as always, if you want to stay up to date for more C++ tutorials like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.